Practice community.
So we're going to start our practice or our session today with a short little meditation, just an opportunity for everyone to get grounded. So I would like to invite you to come into a comfortable shape for you. Whether you're seated cross-legged or seated on a chair, lying down, eyes can be closed or open. There's no right or wrong. Take some big breaths in and out. Let your breath fill your lungs, fill your chest, fill your torso with air. Exhale to empty and then keep going with your breath, breathing in, filling and filling. Exhaling, letting go. And as you anchor to your breath and as you anchor to this moment, just check in with what you're working with today. Are you feeling anxious or at ease? Are you feeling tired, energized? What is happening inside with you? See if you can step into a state of acceptance with whatever it is going on with you, knowing that everything comes and goes, nothing is permanent. Perhaps taking a moment to establish an intention of what you want to receive from being here. And then when you're ready, you can just gently allow your eyes to flicker open. Amazing. I'm just going to share my screen. And what we kind of were chatting about already when I was asking everyone to check in and sharing what interested you has kind of covered what I wanted to start us off with, which is a KWL chart. So I was a educator. Well, I still am an educator, just in a different way, but I was a grade 1 teacher and we did these KWL charts with the kids. So the K is what do you know? The W is what do you want to know? And then the L is what did you learn? So it's kind of like a way to like track your learning. So let's just take 2 minutes. If you have a journal in front of you or your phone or whatever, I just want to invite you to write what you know and then what you want to know. So just the K and the W. And we will reconvene after like 2 minutes. And I was going to invite us to share, but we've already done a lot of sharing. So I'm just going to let you keep that to yourself. Or if anyone does want to like type into the chat what they know and what they want to know, that would be cool. If you want to type in the chat. Okay, so someone mentioned this graphic. I think it was Claire that mentioned it, and this was something that I worked on the other day on Canva, and I think it's really common that people think that yoga is just this practice of asana, just the poses, and so much of it gets lost. So there's actually 8 limbs of yoga, and that's what I've included in this graphic, like underneath the iceberg. So there is the yamas, which I'm going to be talking more about in a minute, but there's the yamas, which are the 5 moral restraints, the niyamas, which are the 5 observances. There is asana, the 3rd limb, which is posture. That's what we do in our classes often. Then the 4th limb is pranayama, which is mindful breathing. The 5th is pratyahara, which is turning inward. This is testing me because I mixed them all up. The 6th is dhyana, which is meditation. The 7th is dharana. Sorry, the 6th is dharana, which is concentration. The 7th is dhyana, which is meditation. And then the 8th is samadhi, which is union of the self with the object of meditation. So these are the 8 limbs that Pantanjali outlined in his Yoga Sutras, which so often get a little bit lost. Now, I just realized I told you all to type into the chat, but for some reason, I can no longer see the chat when I'm on screen share. I don't know why. Let me see if I can make this a little smaller and see it. Why? Hold on. Okay, what was written in the chat? Oh, wants to learn more about spirituality yoga. Amazing. Cool. Okay, so what are the Yoga Sutras? Can everyone see my screen sharing as well? Amazing. Oh no. I know they're letting me share again. Hold on. Okay, hold on. Let me try that one more time. Yeah, it's not letting me present. Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to zoom in on my slides. Sorry, guys. Oh, here. Okay, it's working again. There we go. Okay, so what are the sutras? So Ashtanga yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga, are the practices or tools of Raja yoga. Now, Raja yoga means royal yoga, and that is the foundation upon what a lot of modern yoga is based. There are several different lineages of yoga. There's Hatha yoga, there's Raja yoga, there's Bhakti yoga, there's tons of different practices, Karma yoga. And Raja yoga is what was outlined in Pantanjali's Yoga Sutras. And that's always been my personal interest in yoga philosophy. There's quite a few yoga philosophy texts, but this one I've always really loved because it's what my teacher has based his book off of, Meditations from the Mat. Highly recommend this book if you haven't read it, because he brings all these stories from his modern life into the Yoga Sutras and makes it really relatable. And so I think that's where I first got introduced to it. And then I got really interested in it. And the 8 limbs of yoga, which I explained earlier, and I'm going to go into detail, are yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. And some people think of these limbs as a progressive path, like a ladder, like you hit one, then you hit the next, then you hit the next. But I actually think that they're all interrelated and they're all things that we can do at the same time. And rather than thinking of it as like sequential, like I hit this one and then I hit this one and then I hit this one, we can think of it as all things that we're doing all the time. And the first of the 5 limbs are external practices. So these are things that you can actively do towards getting to that state of samadhi. And samadhi is basically the yoga word for like enlightenment. So samadhi could be equated to like nirvana or enlightenment, or like getting to that state of bliss or euphoria that so many different kind of spiritual orientations speak about. Samadhi is like the yoga word for that. The last three limbs are internal aspects. And this used to really confuse me when I first started learning about yoga philosophy, because I was like, all of those things just sound like the same thing to me. Like even when I was reading them earlier, I thought I got mixed up in the order of them. So basically what it really means is it's like an inward progression. So if I go back to that slide that I was just showing you guys, I'm worried it's gonna, there. So the inward practices are dharana, which is concentration, dhyana, which is meditation, and then samadhi, which is the union of the self with the object of meditation. They're kind of like sequential stages that we get to in our meditation practice. So we would begin with just practicing concentration, and then we would get to unbroken concentration, so you're practicing concentration for a few minutes and then you're distracted and then you get back into it. And then when you get to dharana, you're getting to a more lengthy state. And then samadhi is when you hit that state of enlightenment. So it's really just like those three progressive states that you can get with your inward journey. Does anyone have any questions about any of that stuff? Cool. Okay. So I wanted to just share with you this quote. I was pulling through all my YTT resources today, and there's so many incredible experts and comments and quotes, but I love this one because they say the 8 limbs are a sequential system and a holistic practice. There is an internal logic to moving from one limb to the next in given order. The yamas and niyamas help us approach asana with intention for practice. Asana prepares the body for working with the breath. The quiet and controlled breath helps us withdraw the senses, which helps us focus the mind, and so on. But the 8 limbs can also be applied as a holistic practice in which all the limbs function simultaneously and synergistically. So from this holistic perspective, the practices can be done in a way that best suits the needs of the individual in order to evolve spiritually. That's Alan Finger and Wendy Newton. So this is from the first page of Ralph Gates' book. And I love this because it pretty much lays out and organizes some of the main concepts in the 8 limbs of yoga. There's so much to it. Now, something that I think is really interesting is that there's 196 Yoga Sutras, and the word sutra means thread. So there's almost 200 Yoga Sutras, and only 3 of them are about the poses. Only 3 of them are about the asanas, which is so mind-blowing because we have turned the asanas into like the big thing that happens in yoga, when really the asanas were just like a very small bit of it. The asanas are the poses. And some of these sutras have 1 sutra about them. Some have many that go into depth. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you about each of the different books. There's 4 books in the Yoga Sutras and where these concepts come into play in those books. But before I do that, I want to break down what the 8 limbs are, basically. So we start with the yamas and the niyamas, and these are, I would say, the most commonly known of the Yoga Sutras. Like when you talk to people like Kristen, who's doing the Yoga Sutra study course, she's one of the yoga teachers at the Mindful Life practice. She was saying to me, like, the only thing I really know is the yamas and niyamas. So most people do get an exposure to this. I've taught a lot of themed yoga classes on this. And the 5 moral restraints are the yamas, which are ahimsa, which is nonviolence, satya, which is truthfulness, asteya, which is non-stealing, brahmacharya, which is moderation, and aparigraha, which is non-hoarding. Now, something I really love about the way Pantanjali has outlined these sutras is that he tells you what to do, but not how to do it. So in a lot of, well, I say in a lot of modern religions, I was raised without a big religious background, so I don't have that much personal experience in it, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I got so into yoga philosophy, because I didn't have like a spiritual compass or a spiritual guide, and I was kind of searching for like the answers. But from what I've heard about most organized religion is that a lot of organized religion is telling you like what is right or wrong or what to do. And that's the cool thing about Pantanjali's Yoga Sutras, is that he's telling you be nonviolent, but he's not telling you how to be nonviolent. And so that's up to you to figure out, okay, what does my practice of nonviolence look like? What does my practice of truthfulness look like? What does my practice of non-stealing look like? And we could go on and on discussing these concepts. I actually do it in the 108 that carries in, but also in the yoga teacher training. Like, we talked for an hour on Saturday about ahimsa and what that means to us and how we could live it and practice it. So some of these things were revolutionary for me. Like, for example, aparigraha, that was a big one for me because I grew up in a home with one parent who was a hoarder. And so my whole childhood that was normal for me, was my house just being full of stuff. And I carried all my stuff around with me for like a long time throughout my journey. And it's kind of been this peeling back and this evolution. And I know I've told this story a few times, but when I moved to Kuwait, when I was 23, that was the first time that I had to kind of let go of everything, because I could only bring like 2 suitcases on the plane. And I had this empty apartment with like, one closet full of stuff. And it was the first time in my life that I had like a apartment that was like spacious and organized and clean. And that was one of the first times that I really understood the value of that practice of aparigraha, of non-hoarding or letting go. And so it's been this constant onion peeling, unfolding, and I'm still kind of faced with it. Like when I left Dubai, I gave away all this stuff, and I still miss my stuff from my life there all the time. So it's not like I've hit this state of like, oh, I don't need stuff anymore. But it's just this constant reflection on like, what is my connection to stuff? Why do I miss it? What purpose is that attachment to that stuff making me, how is that serving me? And how can I find that connection, or how can I make peace without actually needing all this stuff in my life, basically? So it's kind of like just touch points to reflect on. And I actually saw this amazing clip, which I shared on my Instagram story, about aparigraha. Just a side note, it was like a minimalism podcast, and he was saying how your memories are not in the actual stuff, the memories are in you, and the stuff just triggers the memory. And I really liked that, because that's kind of been an ongoing learning practice for me. So that is the first of the 8 limbs, the yamas. Does anyone have any yamas questions? I can't believe it's already 7:45. Oh my God. We're just on limb 1. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, cool. So the niyamas are the 5 observances. Now, how these have been framed to me in the past are that the yamas are internal. Sorry, the yamas are external and the niyamas are internal. So, however, that being said, they can really be applied in both ways. So I'm going to give you an example. Saucha is purity, and what that basically means is cleanliness. Now, that can be an internal practice, right? Your daily shower, your daily bath, that's internal. But it can also be external, like you're cleaning up the stuff in your house. I had this reflection during the pandemic, which I was doing one of my on-demand yoga classes, and I was like, wow, that was like a really amazing reflection. I must have read it somewhere, but it was about how the whole world shut down in the pandemic, and then we all stopped, driving our cars and driving our planes and whatever, and we were like all practicing saucha on the earth. Do you remember that? Like, all of nature was coming alive again, and there were like dolphins in the canals and in Venice, and like there was all this amazing stuff happening. And I was saying, that's like the whole world is practicing saucha. So that would be an example of like, this is an internal practice, yet we really can apply all of this externally as well. And I remember in the on-demand video, I was like, I hope we remember this forever. And like, the world has just gone back to like totally normal after the pandemic. But anyway, okay, so that's Saucha. And then we have Samtosha, which is contentment, which is basically just finding like a sense of peace. We have Tapas, which is commitment. Svadhyaya, which is a practice of self-study. And Ishvara Pranidhana, this is devotion to a higher power. Now, this is an interesting one because for a long time, I felt really uncomfortable with it because I didn't want to teach it and people to think that I was teaching religion. So I kind of touched on religion a few moments ago, and there's some people that feel that yoga is a religion. It does come from Hindu origins. It was something I faced a lot in the Middle East being a teacher. Sometimes with Muslim parents, but also with parents from other, like I had a parent from Russia who they were Christian and they didn't want their kid doing yoga in my class because they thought it was a conflict with the religion he practiced. And I think it's really important to note that it's kind of like, this is a metaphor in education, which maybe might not make sense, but I worked at an IB school, an international or baccalaureate school, and at the IB school, it's like a framework that you apply on any curriculum, right? So you would teach the IB framework for the American curriculum, or you would teach the IB framework for the British curriculum, or teach the framework for the Canadian curriculum. And that's kind of how I think of yoga. So our Yoga Sutras or our yoga philosophy is like a framework, and then we can use it to work through whatever our religion is, whatever our spirituality is. So for me, I wasn't really raised with a religious orientation. So this has become my spirituality. But we have people in our community that are practicing Muslims. We have people in our community that are Christian, Catholic, literally every religion who are doing yoga. And so what I think is amazing is that the philosophy of yoga gives you these guidelines, but it's not a conflict, and you can apply it to whatever other things you're practicing. Like I know, for example, Yasser, seeing on your manifestation board, Yasser was one of his manifestations or one of his goals was to pray every day. And I love that because it's like he's practicing, his religion and then also our yoga practice, and it's working together to get to that state of spirituality that you're seeking. Does anyone have any questions about those?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
So you're saying that the yamas are more external and the niyamas are internal, or was it the opposite way?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, because if you look at the yamas, they're kind of about how we relate to the world around us, like being nonviolent towards other people, being truthful towards other people, not stealing from other people. Non-hoarding is related to our stuff. However, I really think it can be applied internally as well. Being not violent towards yourself, being truthful towards yourself, not stealing from yourself, so I think it can be applied to both, but that was how Pantanjali differentiated and how they've been explained and translated over the years. Okay, we have these practices now, which are the asanas, which we all know of. We have enough of that, so I'm going to skip past it. The asanas are the poses. Pranayama is mindful breathing. So these are all of our breath work practices. There's so many different ones. I love Nadi Shodhana, which is alternate nostril breathing, but there's ways in which you can lengthen your breath, shorten your breath. You can breathe fully through one nostril, fully through the other. There's different practices with different goals of quieting and calming the mind. And then there's Pratyahara, which is turning inward. There is Dharana, which is concentration, Dhyana, which is meditation, and then Samadhi, which is the union of the self with the object of meditation. Now, one of my favorite things is the 5 afflictions. And these are the obstacles on your spiritual journey. And I love these because Pantanjali basically said these are 5 problems that all people have, and all problems fit into these 5 categories. And I love it because I feel like it totally relates to modern day, like not much has changed. So we have avidya, which is spiritual ignorance. So that's really just forgetting who you are, forgetting your sense of spirituality. And that is like when I was in like a state of really, really deep depression, I had totally lost my spiritual path. Like I had totally lost my compass, lost my purpose, lost the role I played in the world. And that was when I was suffering with avidya, which is spiritual ignorance. There's asmita, which is pride, and that is basically our ego. And that's a direct connection to avidya. So we've lost our sense of who we are, and our ego can move us in two ways. It can either be what we often think of when we hear the word ego is like, oh, he has a big ego, right? That's the one hand of it, of thinking that you're like better than other people. And then the other side of it is if you're in this state of depression, which I've experienced, and I'm sure some of us in this space have experienced, your sense of self is so depleted and so defeated that you're not feeling confident in who you are. And that obstructs your ability to, you know, step into your purpose and accomplish what you're here to do and what you're capable of, because you've lost who you are, you have then lost that sense of self, basically. So it's kind of like a two-sided thing. Now we have Raja and Devesha. Raja is desire, aversion is Devesha. I love this idea of Raja and Devesha as it applies to addiction. I think it was Rolf Gates who said this, that our addiction can basically be either desire or aversion. So we either desire feeling like numbed out, we desire to get drunk, we desire to like, you know, lose responsibility, whatever we want to get from it, or we are avoiding something. We are avoiding having a tough conversation. We're avoiding, you know, telling our partner we don't want to be in this relationship. We're avoiding not wanting to do our job. And basically all addiction is either like desire or aversion. That's what Rolf said. And I really liked that. And then the last one is Abhinivesha, which is fear of death. Now, I don't talk about this one too much because I think it's really overwhelming people, but I actually had a conversation with my grandma about it the other day, because my grandma's in her mid-90s, and she's kind of gotten to that point where, which many of us have sort of probably experienced with the elderly people in our life, is that she's talking about her coming to the end of her life. And she's been speaking about this for a long time, but you know, speaking about maybe not being here at Christmas. And I said to her, you know, this is really reminding me of this yoga philosophy, Abhinivesha, which is fear of death. And so many of us are afraid of our life's ending. And as a result, we don't do the things we want to do. We don't say the things we want to say. And in reality, we can't control the moment that we're born. We can't control the moment that we die. The only thing we can control is every single moment that we're here. Like this moment right now, the next moment, that's the only thing that is in control of us. But because so many of us are caught up in fear of dying, we won't do the things that we really want to do, like, or do the things that scare us. Like, you know, you got people that are so afraid of being on an airplane that they won't ever leave, you know, their hometown. And that would be an example of Abhinivesha, fear of death, or being afraid of, you know, I used to be super afraid of heights. So I went skydiving in Dubai, and that was amazing. And it totally, like, I didn't overcome the fear, but I just kind of did it anyway, and just said to myself, you know, if I die right now, well, then I've had a good life. I've like accomplished what I want to do. And that's what I always say to myself now, whenever I'm taking those big risks of like, okay, this could be the end, but I'm like at peace with that. And so that can be super related to so many things we avoid. Like some people are really uncomfortable in Shavasana because Shavasana is corpse pose, and that's about, you know, letting go. And so, yeah, so these are the 5 afflictions, which I really love. Does anyone have any questions about any of those? And how are we doing for time? We have 5 minutes left. Okay. We have 5 minutes left. We're on slide 3. Okay, I'm just going to quickly go over these last couple things in here. So the 4 aims of life, these are basically what we're all here for. Dharma, our spiritual discipline or our purpose. Artha, the creation of balance in our life. Kama, which is enjoying the fruit of our labor. So enjoying what we want to receive from everything we worked on. And then we have moksha, which is liberation or freedom. And then there's two big aspects of spirituality. There's abhyasa, which is practice. So that's us literally doing the things that we need to do to get us to this state. And then there's vairagya, which is letting go. So this is an overview of the 8-limb path. Now, I did have 19 more slides. I had mapped out all the different books. Basically, I have this on the Yoga Sutra website, like the page about the course, but basically where all of these different things fit into as opposed to where it's laid out in the book. But I'm just going to skip through those. So if you are curious about that, I'm going to send this out and then you'll have it. And then I was going to show you what one Yoga Sutra looks like. So this is Sutra 1.1, Atha Yoga Anushanam, Now the Teachings of Yoga. So Yoga Sutras are really short. The reason why they're so short is probably for two reasons. One, because they didn't have computers or printers or scanners, so they're all written by hand. And two, also because I think Pantanjali wanted them to be brief so that people could remember them easier. So they're super brief, they're one line, and there's several translations to every Sanskrit word. So Atha, an auspicious beginning, yoga, meaning union, balance, that harmonious state of mind, and Anushasanam, which means that follows, that which is accompanied by, along with, in conformity with. That's from Yoga International. So I have done quite a few Yoga Sutra reflections because I did do this Yoga Sutra course last year, but I still feel like I've only skimmed the surface. I haven't done every single one. There are things that drop the ball. This was part of the 300-hour yoga teacher training we did this past year, and I decided to make it a fully separate course so that I don't drop the ball, so that things get covered, and so that every single thing gets learned throughout the year. So I was writing these daily Yoga Sutra reflections, and this was one that I just wanted to share about now the teachings of yoga. What does this mean? And it simply just means this moment right now is all that there is. And so the reflection that I was having when I wrote this it was a year ago, and my phone had shut off and it wasn't working in Bali. And as a result, I ended up really experiencing the moment. Like I walked for an hour from my yoga class to my villa. Because my phone wasn't working, I was able to slow down and notice the street around me and speak to people. And I had to embrace that moment. And that was the teaching of the power of yoga. So Atha Yoga Anushanam, the power of now. So now the teachings of yoga. So that's just one example. That's the first one. There's 200 more of these, but we're not going to have time to do all of them today. So we are towards the end of this. I'm wondering, KWL, what did you know? What do you know? What do you want to know? And what did you learn? Before we get into that, I realize we're at the hour, so I just want to quickly share a little bit about the Yoga Sutra course, which I'm really excited about. So basically, we're going to be breaking down all of the Yoga Sutras book by book over the course of 1 year. So we'll do 3 or 4 sutras per week. There's going to be a yoga practice, a discussion on each sutra. And it was amazing this past year. I did it with a group of 6 women, and Neve, who was in that group, said it was like amazing to just walk through a whole year together. And I think it's so funny that Yasmin said at the start, I'm kind of failing at this challenge because I haven't done yoga. And I was actually going to unmute, and then I didn't want to interrupt and break my own sharing rules. But if you haven't done any physical yoga, that doesn't mean that you haven't done yoga, because yoga is actually everything. And all the things we were talking about and sharing about at the start of this practice, that's all yoga. All of the stories, all of the ways that we're living beyond our practice, that's all yoga. So even if you feel like you haven't been doing it in this challenge, you actually have. And that's really cool to come to these sharings and these reflections and realize that and share that journey together. And I am definitely on it with all of you as well. I'm definitely not a Yoga Sutra expert. I'm still learning it. And so that's cool too, is that we're all kind of learning together. And I wanted to offer all of you as well a discount on the Sutra Study course. So if you sign up, you can have 20% off of the program. And here's a little meme. Oh no, it's not moving. That's sad. I'm sure you've seen it on my Instagram anyway. But this is just a meme about how, you know, Pantanjali put all these sutras together and we end up just like teaching poses in our practices. And if Pantanjali knew, he would roll his eyes. Okay, so let me scooch back to so I'm going to send all of you this presentation. I'm going to send this recording out to anyone who missed it, but I just want to scooch back to the KWL. And if anyone does have to leave, I'm going to stop the share. If you do have to go, please feel free, because I don't want to keep you overtime, because that's a saya, which is non-stealing. Bye, Heather. It was so nice to see you. But I'm just wondering if anyone wants to share what they learned from this session. And I'm going to stop this recording.